Hurricane Milton has just exploded in strength overnight and now a major Category 3 hurricane and headed for Florida's west coast. Tampa's mayor is warning residents to make a plan now to leave. And moments ago, the National Hurricane Center issued a rare special forecast advisory about all of this. Joining us right now is Michael Brennan. He's the director of the National Hurricane Center. Thank you so much for joining us. How dangerous is this storm, Michael?
It's extremely dangerous, and we've seen Milton explosively strengthen this morning, now Category 3, expected to be a dangerous hurricane as it approaches Florida on Wednesday. We've now got storm surge and hurricane watches in effect for much of the west coast of Florida. Hurricane watches likely to go into the interior and over to the east coast later today, and we're going to see significant life-threatening impacts from surge, wind, and flooding rainfall start to play out in Florida beginning overnight Tuesday night, Wednesday, and into Wednesday night and Thursday.
This is an unusual track for a hurricane. This is not the type of thing that we see very much. Can you talk about the areas in Florida? And I know the entire West Coast needs to be alert right now, but the areas that are particularly vulnerable.
Yeah, well, you have the west coast of Florida is exceptionally vulnerable to storm surge, especially from a track that's perpendicular to the coast, where you're going to push that Gulf of Mexico water well inland into these bays and harbors. It's places like Tampa Bay, Charlotte Harbor, down to Fort Myers. These are places that are very vulnerable to surge. And if you look at the storm surge forecast we put out this morning, we're expecting somewhere between Anclote River and Inglewood, including the Tampa Bay area, somewhere in here to see 8 to 12 feet of inundation above ground level. Significant inundation all along the coast, from Chokoloskee up to north of Tampa to Yankeetown, Suwannee River. Everyone here is at risk of at least seeing 4 to 5 feet of inundation above ground level. So that's really life-threatening surge. That's why we've got evacuations that are starting in many of these coastal communities this morning. You've got today, Monday, tomorrow, Tuesday, to get to a safe place. You're going to want to be in your safe place by sundown tomorrow.
This is an unusual track for a hurricane. This is not the type of thing that we see very much.
This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. We are seeing hurricane after hurricane after hurricane. As they say on the news, or are saying on the news, they're facing down a monster. And that's exactly what's occurring here. We're facing down a monster, because we can look at the path of these storms and we can tell, with all the knowledge that we all have about weather modification and weather control, that these are not normal weather patterns. Anybody out there that sees this and thinks that it's normal is either kidding themselves, or they're so fearful to actually be able to grasp what the government is doing here that they just refuse to believe what's really become reality, that the government is ramping up weather modification against civilians. I've warned for a while about conservative honey traps. I've warned about how Florida suddenly became this safe haven for every conservative Christian out there. How they literally told everybody, hey, come down to Florida if you're conservative. We won't push any of these insane woke ideologies on you. Come on down to Florida. We won't mandate that you inject yourself with poison. Just come on down. And everybody went on down to Florida, and they're getting ravaged with these storms. Now, most of these people are conservative Republicans, and the majority of them are obviously good people. They have good ideologies. They're anti-globalist, but they don't even have the knowledge about weather modification and weather warfare. They just put all their faith and hope in Donald Trump, that he's going to do something about the globalists that are in power, the globalists who are doing all this stuff to everybody, taking away our rights, taking away all the freedoms that we once had. And obviously, Donald Trump is not going to save anybody from any of this. He's actually being used as a hero, right? That quote from Albert Pike says, right? When they need a hero, we will supply them one. And that's what Donald Trump has become. So we're seeing what this storm looks like. Not even a full week yet since Helene. We have this one coming that is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And here are some of the images, if you haven't seen, that people are posting on their social media accounts of what the sky looks like off the coast, off the Gulf Coast in Florida. You could see geoengineering at its craziest, because some of these skies are so unnormal and so unnatural. You would think that maybe some people out there would see this and say, this looks like a scene out of Ghostbusters. This doesn't look normal. Since when does the sky look like this? But again, since the conservative media Fox News and the News Nation and all these news media outlets that conservatives trust him because they tickle their ears with mocking Democrats and promoting Donald Trump. They don't talk about weather warfare and weather modification. They just say, well, it's a crazy climate cult, right? These people don't realize that they are literally sitting ducks right now for onslaughts of weather warfare. Look at the sky in Florida. Tell me if this looks natural to you. So that right there just looks like something out of a movie. I mean, it literally looks like a scene from Ghostbusters. And I think what's bothering me the most right now, and I'm really struggling with everything that's going on, is the way that people are responding to some of these tragedies. I'll be perfectly honest with you. There's some things that I've covered in the past, like the pizza event that we all know about in 2016, that keep me up at night. Well, watching people politicize what's going on here, talking about hurricanes and how conservatives are going to use the hurricane to politicize and say that the Democrats aren't down here helping out. How people have gotten to this point of unhinged and psychotic where they're literally looking at their fellow man, and because of the fact they don't vote the same way that they do, that they're okay with this stuff that's going on. They're actually looking at this and not feeling sympathy for people. They're looking at this and they're just saying to themselves, well, the conservatives in Florida, because everybody out there views Florida as a conservative state now, well, they're just going to use this as a way to politicize everything that's coming on November 5th. And none of these people seem to realize that nothing that's coming on November 5th isn't predetermined and pre-planned, because it is. So if you actually look at some of this stuff and the trajectory of this storm, you're actually going to see that a lot of people out there are talking about, well, if you were going to wipe out Tampa, if you were going to clear Tampa out, if you were going to put it completely underwater and destroy the infrastructure of that city, you would need a storm to come off of the Gulf of Mexico. You would need it to come off the Gulf. Normally, these things come from the south. This is literally a bullseye going right across the entire state of Florida. Not going upward to Georgia, not going upward to the Carolinas, really. It might hit part of the coast, but it's literally as if they put a giant bullseye on Florida and said, look, we're going to hit Florida from the top to the bottom, and we're going to make sure we put the coast underwater, right? Now, is it a coincidence that Tampa Bay is one of these pilot sites for a smart city? If you haven't seen some of the stuff out there with Tampa Bay, they're all about becoming a smart city, even though it's a conservative state, because technology is one of those things that the conservatives don't seem to understand is pivotal in a new world order globalist government. It's the number one thing, technology. That's why I'm warning people to get away from their technology, to pull back from tech, to not let them take more power from us by us moving forward with digital IDs and all these new technologies they continue to roll out, just like all this AI that nobody seems to understand, and we just are supposed to accept it instead of saying, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You're telling us that AI is going to take jobs, it's going to kill, has the potential to kill humanity, and you want us to accept this? Well, they know that nobody out there can realize what they're even saying, so they just go, well, it's beneficial for health. It's beneficial to make life easier for people, and we're supposed to just accept it. While at the end of those sentences where they tell us how good it's going to be for humanity, they tell us, well, AI could kill off humanity, and we should be pushing against it. So if you don't understand, the AI governance system runs on smart cities. It runs on these cities that are governed through artificial intelligence. So to get these cities, nobody out there is going to be on board with saying, well, how about we give our tax money to Tampa Bay and we just change the whole infrastructure there in Tampa Bay and turn it into a smart city? Because 99% of people would go, no, why are we wasting our tax money on that? We don't want smart city technology. We don't need it. Everything's fine the way it is. So what the globalists need to do is they need to destroy the infrastructure, put it underwater, destroy buildings so that they have to rebuild all of these buildings. So they have to rebuild these cities that are going to be demolished. This is why I continually emphasize the stuff that we see going on in Democrat states, right? What do you think, Gavin Newsom and these guys, that they love to see criminals sitting on the street corner, shooting up and doing all this other stuff? They're allowing them to do it deliberately because they're going to come in with change. They're going to come in and say, okay, now we're going to fix the problem that we created. We're going to have AI governance. We're going to have more technology in place so that we can have more control over the chaos that we're allowing to consume these cities, which is really chaos that they're funding and they're orchestrating, right? So Tampa Bay is one of these cities that already has a blueprint in place to turn it into a smart city. What's needed, of course, is people to be on board with it, but most people are not on board with it because most people would say, well, we don't need that. It's not necessary. But once the whole city is underwater and they say, well, we got to rebuild Tampa Bay, people will go, okay, we got to rebuild Tampa Bay. And they'll say, well, we're going to rebuild it now and we're going to make it state of the art. It's going to have the best technology you could possibly imagine. All these buildings that were once up to code are no longer up to code because the new code will require all these buildings to have all of this technology infrastructure in place in every single building. And people will go, oh, okay, whatever. I don't know what that means. I'm trying to figure out if men can have babies or not yet. You know, that's the topic that the news wants you to focus on instead of the government literally killing people and destroying them with weather. So the other stuff that's out there, I just want to put in this video, is some of these things, like the way that people are talking. It just shows you how dumb people are, right? And I love how everybody looks at Twitter like this freedom platform. Oh, you could speak on, and they put these disinformation boxes underneath everything there too, right? People are talking about everything that just happened with Helene and they're fact checking. Oh, the rumor that the government created the hurricane. Facts. Helene formed from an organized band of showers and thunderstorms in the Gulf of Mexico, the National Hurricane Center in Miami reported. Then you have literally brain dead people, right, who think that this is all funny, but they don't realize how stupid they actually are because this stuff is all documented. Weather modification and weather control is documented. This isn't some crazy conspiracy. Now, if you want to sit there and you want to say, well, I don't think the government is using it against us, that's one thing. But to sit there and actually not be able to grasp the fact that they can do this through cloud seeding and geoengineering, you're just living in an alternate planet. Okay, so here's somebody tweeting, so how does this work? Does anyone know? Do they use hurricane seeds? Do they come in category 1 through category 5 sizes? Where would one purchase them? At a hurricane store, online? I mean, this is what we're living among. We're living among the brain dead, right? All of these people who think they know what they're talking about, who think they have a clue, who have been propped up, who have been perched up, to be given platforms like this to speak, and then the rest of us get silenced, of course. And these people, all that does is feed into their ego, makes them think that they have a clue about what's going on. And let me play for you this clip of John Brennan, former CIA director under Barry Soetoro, Barack Obama, talking about weather modification and weather control. Here's your CIA, here's your corrupt organization whose whole purpose is to spy on civilians, to monitor civilians, to go after its own civilians, which we're told, of course, the whole purpose of the CIA is to protect us, which couldn't be further from the truth. But here he is at the Council on Foreign Relations talking about weather control. But is this a conspiracy? I mean, this is a Democrat, is the head of the CIA talking about something that most people out there think is a crazy conspiracy.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations.
So wow, he's openly talking about having the ability to control the weather. We've all discussed the stuff going on at HARP, which they no longer need to experiment at HARP anymore because they're doing it all around the Earth right now. Those towers are helping all of this stuff actually be steered where they want to steer it. And you heard him discuss steering storms. How convenient that they discuss steering storms, but none of these storms are getting steered away. They're getting steered directly onto targets, right? I mean, you would think with this one in the Gulf, couldn't they steer this towards the little bit south of Florida so it just misses? Oh no, it looks like it's being steered directly, so it's a direct hit across the entire state, coast to coast. So I also wanted to put this out here because I remember that this was floating around a couple of years ago and I never put anything in a video, but this is circulating again because some people have found some of these stories where they're seeing antennas underwater. And they're seeing antennas underwater and they're going, what in the world is this? Now, of course, the people out there who dismiss this stuff are the same type of people who will believe whatever the government tells them. They just need to hear some type of story like, oh, these antennas underwater are to restore coral reefs. And then they just go out there and they repeat it. And they're like, you're feeding misinformation. They don't realize that every bit of information that they get fed to them from the government is misinformation. And in fact, these people literally think that they're fact checking and they're doing research because the government goes, don't be suspicious of antennas underwater. Those are just there to help us restore coral reefs. And these suckers believe it hook, line, and sinker. If you've never seen this before, let me just show you these underwater antennas that they'll tell you are there for coral. But just imagine how many of these they have around the Earth right now, out at sea, that have the ability to modify weather. Because again, if HARP was showing up in every single state, people would be suspicious. But since a lot of this stuff is underwater off of coast, and then of course there's a lot of these towers that they tell you are there for you to download music faster, well, nobody can actually see what's going on. So they tried to poo-poo this as if it's a crazy conspiracy, but it certainly looks like a lot of antennas underground off the coast of Florida. So again, we're supposed to believe that something that looks exactly like HARP is antennas that were put underneath water so that people could grow, so that our government could work on the coral reefs. And don't forget, a lot of these wind turbines that are out there emit frequencies. I've talked about this in the past. I was never able to get a video up here on YouTube. How convenient. Every time I tried, it was removed or blocked or not allowed to be up. But the wind turbines, you may have noticed that they're putting them up all offshore across both coasts, right? And they tell you, well, these wind turbines are for this or for that. And then you saw a lot of the bizarre activity. I'm sure you've seen videos of dolphins that are running up onto the shores of onto the coasts, whales attacking ships. That's because those wind turbines emit frequencies as well, and they're messing up the Doppler on a lot of these ocean mammals that don't have a clue what's going on. They're literally getting frequencies sent at them, and they don't know where they're going. They're not able to navigate through the water because of the frequencies that are coming off of those as well. So these are all things we're supposed to believe are just normal, right? We're supposed to look at storms all of a sudden that are going, like I just covered with Helene. Here comes the hurricane, and then it just goes in a completely different direction of the jet stream. But don't worry, there's propaganda out there, right? Telling us, well, the jet stream isn't going to be the same anymore because the earth is shifting and all this other crap. So all these suckers believe it. And you can literally see these storms now that are popping up like this one, Milton. And you look at it and you go, this is bizarre. This is bizarre. This is literally a storm that's going from west to east in a straight line through the entire state. And they're going to continue to do this over and over and over. And they know the majority of people can't grasp what's happening. And they've been programmed, obviously, to believe that it's the climate. It's the climate that's doing this. So don't be suspicious of all these weird weather patterns, because we've programmed you into thinking that cow farts and, the real carbon they want to reduce, which is you, that you're all responsible for it. So eventually, once we have you fully convinced, we'll be able to modify your behavior by telling you could only go outside X amount of times, you can only fly on a plane X amount of times, because the weather's just going to get worse and worse. Unless, of course, you start imprisoning yourself in your home. But don't worry, Amazon will bring you your groceries and all this other crap, and we'll get you on the internet 24/7 so that your mental health could deteriorate even worse, because ever since really the internet's become a normal thing in everybody's day-to-day lives, everybody's mind is not the same. Mental health is obviously something that they use, but let's be real. We see people out there completely unhinged. We see people out there with zero trades, zero skills whatsoever. People just get up, get on the internet, sit on the internet, and that's what their whole day is, right? Playing video games on the internet, communicating on the internet, or getting their fake news from CNN and the rest of the media outlets out there that continue to pollute people's minds into thinking the stuff they're getting is actually real news when it's not. So prayers for everybody out there who is affected by this, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, this is something that's keeping me up at night. It's giving me, anxiety. I'm sure a lot of you have it when you see some of these people who are posting stuff who are affected by Helene, who are not getting government assistance, and you just go, well, what point, right? At what point do the citizens start realizing that the government's gone completely rogue? But unfortunately, they've politicized it, because you hear all of the civilians who are in those areas talking about, oh my gosh, the Democrats don't even come down here. Trump's down here, right? And they fall into that trap, into that left-right trap, where all civilians need to remove themselves from it. And we need to band together, because there's a group of psychopaths who are claiming to be Democrats and Republicans, who are claiming they were voted into office, who are murdering people using things like weaponized weather and other things that they've been trying to get into your body over the last couple of years as well. And it's only going to get worse, because if you understand the sustainable goals and the carbon footprint and what they're doing, they're literally trying to turn you into a prisoner without actually going to a jail cell. You might say, well, that's fine. I'll stay in my house 24/7. I won't go outside anymore. I'll shut my electricity off, until, of course, you're actually going through it and you realize, wow, I can't even take a shower because of my carbon emissions. Well, I can't flush my toilet, right? And they're convincing you that all this stuff that's happening is because of you and me and us as a collective human race, when it's really just them who are doing it, and they're destroying people's lives. Absolutely frightening. Pray for everybody affected by this. Breaks my heart. Makes me absolutely sick. Makes me absolutely angry. But all we can do is pray. That's all we can do right now. I thank you guys again. God bless all of you and your families as always.